Hi, this is Kevin Trainer, and I'd like to welcome you to my tutorial on logical data modeling. And this is the first part, which I call the ragbag exercise. This is for people who are part of my systems analysis course, although anybody else who found their way to us on YouTube is welcome to stay and watch. Okay, so the first thing that we need to do when we're doing logical data modeling is we need to get some stuff to build a model out of. Okay, and what kind of a model are we going to build? Well, we're going to build an entity relationship diagram. And entity relationship diagrams have quite a bit of information in them, but the basic parts are entities, things in the world that we want to represent in our data model, relationships between entities, and the attributes that are placed on the entities or that occur on the entities that carry the data associated with that entity. So, and in fact, what we're really looking for is entity types and relationship types, and we're looking for, I guess we would say that entity types have attributes associated with them. So how do you do that? Well, you take a look at your application, you look at the problem or opportunity, and you do some brainstorming. Okay, this is a great way to start. And this ragbag exercise that we're going to do is really that. It's kind of a directed brainstorming having to do with what we know about the application. So the application we're going to use here is one called the attendance system. And this is a system I've wanted for a long time, haven't built yet, but I've done a lot of the analysis for it. And it is for students in my classes at the university to record their attendance. That's something that we do with the undergraduates in our department. And the way that we do it in my classes is kind of a pain. We have a log sheet, and I bring a new log sheet for every class, and the students line up and they sign it. And sometimes people forget to sign it, and we get all kinds of issues with that, but for the most part it works. But it's a lot of tallying and all that kind of stuff. And here I'm a systems guy teaching things like systems analysis, and I should have a system to do this. So this is what my attendance system is going to do. And as a guy who teaches systems analysis, I have created a use case diagram for the parts of the applications that I understand so far, which are really the basic use cases. So here we have a copy of the use case diagram that I did for the attendance system, and I have packaged the use cases into 3 groups, because I wanted to be able to demonstrate a set of use case diagrams that had been packaged into separate diagrams. And the first group of use cases I call student-facing. So those are the ones that are primarily for the benefit of the student. And then on the next page, let me roll down a bit. On the next page, I have instructor-facing use cases, and these are primarily for the benefit of the instructor. And then on the third page, I have administrative use cases, and these are really primarily for the benefit of the system, which is why we're calling them administrative. So the reason that we're looking at a use case diagram is really what better way to understand the functionality of the system from a high-level view than to look at a use case diagram. It gives you an idea of what functions the system is used for, who uses the systems for those functions, and you get a pretty broad view. And we're going to use this to inspire an exercise that's kind of brainstorming oriented that we call the ragbag exercise. And in the ragbag exercise, which is named affectionately consistent with one of my colleagues in Norway, Steve Pepper, used to do a data modeling class in which he would begin with what he called the ragbag exercise. And what I've done is to borrow his term. Steve is a Brit, and apparently a ragbag in British parlance is a group of things collected together that are have some things in common and some things different. So it's sort of a ragtag kind of a collection of things, and an informal collection, let's say. And so in honor of Steve, I call this the ragbag exercise. And so what we're going to do is we're going to use that to collect terms. So we're going to be, as inspiration, we're going to be using a use case diagram. And the terms that we're going to collect, we're going to collect in just the word processing document. And this is the kind of thing, if you had a real group of people, you would do on a whiteboard, okay? Or maybe you could use the same kind of document and project it, right? So while we're doing the brainstorming, which I'm going to do with myself here, we're going to come up with a list of terms, okay, that we think should be part of our data model that's going to get expressed as an entity relationship diagram. And so what kind of things are we looking for? Well, we're looking for things that are going to be an entity type. Let's use all caps. Okay. We're looking for something that's going to be a relationship type. Okay. We're looking for something that is going to be an attribute that'll be carried on an entity type. And we're also looking perhaps for something we call important instances. Okay, so entity relationship diagrams work with type instance semantics. So for instance, we might have the entity type person, okay? And we would have instances of that entity type that would become a part of our data store. And they would be instances of type person. And each instance would relate to some instance of the real thing in the real world. So if for instance, we were interested in the persons who are in our particular class, let's say we have 25 of them, then we would have the instance type person, or perhaps more appropriately student. And then there would be an instance for Kevin Trainer, there'd be an instance for Mary Smith, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So when we're doing data modeling, typically we're interested in the entity type, be it person, student, vehicle, course, et cetera. we're not typically interested in the instances, but sometimes when we're coming up with a list of important terms in our ragbag brainstorming exercise, we will come up with something that it turns out to be just an important instance, okay? And maybe we want to keep the important instances in mind for when we begin to populate our data store. Now, the data modeling that we're doing is aimed at relational databases, okay? Now, when you're taking this kind of approach to data modeling, using entity relationship diagrams and doing logical data modeling, you could, in theory, create a logical or conceptual data model, let's call it more appropriately, that could be implemented with a number of technologies. So, for instance, we could come up with a conceptual data model that we could implement with a relational database. We could come up with one that could be implemented with an object database. We could come up with one that would be implemented with RDF and OWL. There are all kinds of physical data store technologies that we could implement from a conceptual data model. In our case, we're just going to be learning about doing the data modeling for relational databases. And so we might take a shortcut or two along the way. So here's what we're going to do when we're going through our application as embodied by the use case diagram. We're going to try to think of terms that are going to be the name of an entity type, the name of an attribute, the name of a relationship type, or perhaps the name of one of the important instances of an entity type. And we're going to list them all kind of brainstorming style under terms. Okay, we're not going to try to figure out what they are. These are just kind of interesting terms that we think are going to be important for the data model. And then we're going to slow down. We're going to say, okay, let's sort these terms into the category where they best apply. So we're going to go through the terms and say, well, this looks like an entity type. This looks like a relationship type. This looks like an important instance. This looks like an attribute. And then we may have some things in the end that are just kind of left over. Perhaps they're some kind of instance, but we don't think that they're important enough to consider in the data modeling. Or maybe they're just kind of unrelated things that happen to pop into our mind, okay? So we're going to begin with a blank sheet here with just these categories on it, okay? And then we're going to do the ragbag exercise brainstorming part where we get the terms. Then we're going to do the next part where we divide them up into entity types, attributes, relationship types, and important instances. And then we're going to stop. That'll be the end of this part of the tutorial. And then we'll go on to the next part of the tutorial where we use that as the input for drawing an entity relationship diagram. Okay? So let's get started. So let's go through the use case diagram a little bit more. Maybe we'll expand it so we can see a little bit more. So of the student-facing use cases, I see two. One is log attendance. So this is where a student would come to class. They'd actually be at class. And they would somehow, after having signed into the system, they would log attendance for that class. They would say, I'm here at this class. Well, a question that's come up a lot of times is how we're going to know that they're actually there. Well, my current idea is that there'll be some kind of password on the board. Okay? So if you're not there, you won't be able to see the password. Well, maybe your friend can tell you the password. Okay, well, maybe the password will change rapidly enough that I'll be displaying it on my computer and your friend will have to be pretty quick to text that to you if you're on the beach somewhere and you want to log attendance. But that's the idea. You're just going to say, I'm here for class, and it's going to confirm back that you are, yep, we have you here for this particular class. The other thing that I think the students will be interested in is generating a student attendance report, which would be class to date, semester to date. Okay, so for this class, here are the ones you made, here are the ones you missed, maybe some statistics. You've been here for 99.9% of the classes or 85.7% of the classes. Okay? Pretty simple information. Okay, so the student is going to feed the logging information in log attendance, and then they're going to get their attendance reported back to them with the use case generate student attendance report. Okay, now the next group of use cases are instructor related. And some of these are pretty administrative, I'll admit. So the actor is the instructor. And one of the things that the instructor has to do is to set up a class to be ready to use this attendance system. And maybe a better use case is just set up class. But I took the parts of it, okay, and I made them separate use cases in their own right. And maybe they are, and maybe they're not. There's certainly the argument that they're not. Create a semester. So if we don't have the semester in, we need to add that. Create the class. Enter class meeting schedule. Okay, so we're going to have to know when the class is supposed to meet. Enter class roster, so we have to know who's in the class. Enter class meeting password. If there's going to be a password for a particular class meeting, then we're going to have to populate that, or perhaps that's going to be generated, in which case that use case is going to go away. Generate class attendance report. So my thought here is this is for a particular class meeting. Okay, so we can say who is there for a particular class meeting. And generate semester attendance report would be for a particular course, what had the aggregate attendance been for all of the students so far, broken down by individual. So that's the way I see that happening. And then the last package of use cases that I have are the administrative use cases. And my actors here are the system admin and the system user. And in this sense, the system user is a general kind of a role that could include anybody who's going to use any function within the system, including the system admin. Okay, so anybody, for instance, who's going to have to log in and get authorization to use one of the use cases is going to have to go through this authorized user use case, and where they play the role of system user, and they're also going to have to log in when they begin their interacting with the system. So this could be a student, this could be the instructor, this could be a system admin who, might be the instructor or might be some third person. Okay? And so my thought is in authorized user, the system user would Well, I'm not sure exactly how this works. The system user, I think, would request um, to get authorization to use the system, and then it would probably be approved by a system administrator, after which um, it would be confirmed back to the system user. And then at that point, the system user would be able to log in. And as a part of the confirmation from the system admin, they would be giving the authorization to use particular use cases. So if they were a student, they would just get to use the student use cases. If they were an instructor, they'd be able to use the instructor use cases. And then everybody would be able to use the login use case, and only the system admin would be able to use the authorized user use case as a system admin. So that's what the system's going to do, okay? So let's try to come up with some terms, okay? And again, I want to remind you that we're not trying to categorize them yet. In keeping with the brainstorming approach of our ragbag exercise, we just want to put down terms. So let's think about who the actors are. Well, we've got student. Let's put these in lowercase. Student. We've got instructor. We've got system user. We've got system administrator, right? So we have them. Then what other kind of things do we have? Well, we have a course. Let's call it a course offering. And when I say a course offering, what I mean is a particular offering of a particular course, a particular section of a particular course in a particular semester. Okay. I'd like to be able to use this for maybe more than one institution. I only really take attendance at one institution that I teach at right now, but I'd like to be able to use it at more than one. So institution, just cut the requirements. That was a nice to have. Okay, so not institution. We're only going to deal with one institution here. So we have a course offering. We have a class meeting. That's an individual meeting of a course. Okay. Probably going to have something called a registration, which is going to be the registration of a student in a course offering, right? We mentioned that we're going to have a class meeting password. Right? So let's come up with some other ideas. So we have a lot of things. These are, so student, instructor, system user, system admin, course offering, semester, class meeting, registration, and class meeting password. All the ones except the password, for me, are probably entity types. These are things in the world or in the system that we're going to want to keep track of. Okay? Class meeting password is probably some kind of attribute. It's some kind of piece of data that's going to be associated with each entity, the appropriate entity type. For instance, a class meeting that entity type is probably going to have the attribute class meeting password. Okay? So we don't have a lot of attributes identified so far. But let's talk about if the things we've identified so far are probably entity types, then what about relationship types? Okay, so a student is registered for a course offering. So let's say registered for, put a little, no, let's not put any little underscores because we're not using that. Let's just call it registered for. Okay. An instructor is teaches a particular course offering. Okay. A course offering is takes place in a particular semester. Okay, and I'm going to cheat a little bit and just going to say has semester. Okay, that's a relationship between a course offering, let's say for semester. Okay, it's a course offering for a semester. Okay. A student already registered for a class. Okay, a student, either they're going to attend a class meeting or they didn't. So let's say attended, right? Okay, so we kind of think of that as an event where they attend a class meeting. Okay. So we have a lot of things there. Now let's think about, trying to think. So a student has a relationship to a course offering. A course offering has a relationship. We need a relationship between a class meeting and a course offering. Okay, let's call it is meeting of. Okay, so a class meeting is a meeting of a course offering. Okay. Attended. Okay. So we have a lot of terms for student, instructor. We don't have anything for system user or system admin yet. I'm going to have to take care of that. Course offering, semester, class meeting, registration, class meeting password. And then we've got registered for, teaches, for semester, attended, is meeting of. Okay. And let's talk about the system user and the administrator. Okay. So, let's see. What kind of things do we want to know about the system user? Well, let's say a couple of things that we want to know. We're going to want to know the username. Okay. We're probably going to want to know their email address. Okay. We're probably going to want to know who they are. So we're going to know probably going to want to know if a particular user is a particular student, okay, or a particular instructor. Okay, so if that user is a student, then they're probably going to have a relationship is student. So is user for student, is user for instructor. Okay, we're going to have the username and their email address. We're probably also going to want to know what kind of things that people are allowed to do. So I think we need an entity type permission. So people are going to have permissions. Okay. And we're going to want to know a user has a permission. Okay. And let's call it right now, let's say permission for use case. Okay. And there we go. So what other kinds of things are we going to need? Well, we've got the student, we have the instructor. So let's start coming up with some attributes that things are going to have. So the student's going to have a student name. Okay, we're going to have the instructor is going to have an instructor name. Okay, the course offering is going to have a course offering name. The semester is going to have a semester name, like spring 2016. Right? A class meeting is going to have a date. So maybe it's class meeting date. Okay. You need to have something like that. We already have our password. Okay. And then different to the course offering name and the class meeting name, let's assume that the course is always going to meet in the same place, right? So and it's always going to meet at fixed times. So we need a course offering location, course offering time. Okay, something like that. All right. So I think this would be enough to really get started on the data model, the conceptual data model for the attendance system. So we've done the first part of the RAGBAG exercise, which is to brainstorm on the terms. And I kind of went it the way that I normally think of things. Okay, I think of what are the things in the world that we want to track, and those came first: student, instructor, etc. Then what kind of relationships do they have with each other? That kind of came next. And then to the extent that I had some attributes, some data fields that were going to be associated with each of the entity types, I thought of those last, although I got a couple of attributes out a little bit earlier. So let's look at these. Let's say student, instructor, system user, system administrator, course offering, semester, class meeting, registration. Those are all going to be entity types. Okay, those are all things in the world that we want to be part of our model. Okay. And let's see, class meeting password sounds like it's an attribute. So let's go down and put that under attribute. Okay. Registered for teachers for semester attended is meeting of. Those are all relationships. Cut those and put them down under relationship types. Okay. And we call these types because, of course, there are individual relationships between individual instances. So these things that we're talking about are relationships types, not relationship instances. Sometimes that's hard to see, but it is true. And let's see, what else do we have? Let's see if we can find some other relationships. Is user for student, is user for instructor. Okay, so let's put those in relationships. Okay, and then let's go back. Has permission. That's a relationship. That looks good to me. And let's see what else we have left. Permission for use case. Okay. So I think a permission for a use case is an entity type. Just my gut feel. Why? Well, because I've been doing this for too many years to count, okay? So I think that's an entity type. And let's see, it looks like we're getting down to attributes: username, email address, student name, instructor name, course offering name, semester name, class meeting date, course offering location, course offering time. So these are all data fields. Okay, and data fields are attributes. So let's go down to our attribute list and put these things down. Now we had some blank space in there, and I'll get rid of that. Okay. So we've gone from having no ideas to having a bunch of terms that'll give us a great start. Okay, and we have classified them as entity types, attributes that are going to be some of the fields that are on those entity types. We probably don't have an exhaustive list of things, especially the attributes yet, but we've got a good start. Okay, and then we have the relationship types, which are the things that are going to connect the entity types when we get to our entity relationship diagram. And we didn't come up with any important instances. I leave that category there because there are times when you're with a group of people who are not used to this kind of exercise. They'll bring up a lot of things that turn out to be important instances. So you need a place to park them, and that's where I park them. And we didn't get any extraneous terms that we didn't want to classify as anything at all because I was the only guy in the brainstorming. And again, I've been doing this for quite a while. So we've come to the end of part 1 of conceptual data modeling. We have a list of terms that came from the ragbag exercise, and we have classify the terms as entity types, attributes, relationship types, and then we don't have any important instances. And we're going to use that when we get to part 2, drawing the entity relationship diagram. So I'm going to say goodbye until part 2. Bye-bye.